The Art of the Pivot is brought to you by Signavio.
Hello there and welcome again to Art of the Pivot. I am your host, Mark Jeffries, and today we're joined by Tim Minahan, Executive Vice President, Business Strategy for Citrix. Over 400,000 companies use Citrix digital workspace solutions to provide their employees simple, secure, and reliable access to the resources they need to get work done wherever it needs to get done. In his role, Tim is responsible for driving the company's overall business strategy, and he joined Citrix, by the way, in 2015, bringing with him over 20 years of executive leadership experience. Tim, it is great to have you with us. Where do we find you today?
Marks, thanks for having me. I'm here in my home office like everyone else. This happens to be in Atlanta.
All right, Atlanta, Georgia. I bet you're feeling the heat already as we get into June and beyond. So let's talk business. That number, over 400,000 customers, is pretty impressive. The company helped create, I guess, an industry around this idea of workforce virtualization. Tell me a bit more about that if you can.
Yeah, certainly, Mark. As you said, since our inception almost 30 years ago, Citrix has been always about powering a better, more secure way to work. We like to say that we were remote work before remote work was cool. And so, as you said, we pioneered this concept of virtualization, desktop virtualization, that really allowed employees to access the applications they needed no matter where they were doing their work, whether that was in the office, on the road, or now as we're seeing at home. And it was a novel concept at the time, but it was vital for companies to capitalize on this then emerging trend of the information worker. And that really started this digital transformation of the workplace. And you flash forward to today, and the pandemic, as we all know, has accelerated the digitization of business and has companies in all industries beginning to rethink their workforce strategies, where work gets done, who does the work, how it gets done, and really rethink their work models in ways they haven't since Henry Ford. And so Citrix has really been a core enabling platform for this rapidly emerging world of digital and distributed work.
Just thinking about your organization, what it stands for, what it has stood for so many years, the pandemic, while offering you an opportunity to grow and to strengthen, I'm guessing also offered your competitors, both new and old, a chance to muscle in on the space. How was the competitive landscape over the last year?
Yeah, certainly the world has woken up to the need for secure hybrid work and the realization that, even before the pandemic, that employees did need to get their best work done wherever that happened to be across any device and in any location. Well, flash forward to today, and that last vestige or the last domino of resistance to a more flexible work model has fallen. And the fact that there was some bias against working outside the office because there was a belief that work couldn't get done unless you were in the office. I think if you consider that we've seen the first increase in employee productivity in a decade during the time we're all working from home, it's kind of put that myth to rest. And now as companies are rolling back to the office, they're recognizing that they need to maintain this flexible work. And it has many benefits. It's not just about should Sam or Susie work in the office or continue to work at home. It's really about how do I provide my employees with the best environment so they can be most productive? How do I then use this flexible work model to begin to rethink about my work models and my workforce strategies, tapping into new talent and skills that may be well beyond commuting distance to any one of my offices. And yes, the competitive landscape has increased. You're seeing both our partners and competitors really rally around this idea of the importance of employee experience, the importance to fuel a more secure and hybrid work model.
And I do want to talk about the employee experience shortly, but just finishing off on this point, I was having a conversation with a client this morning, and he was telling me about how a lot of his team have fallen in love with being at home, with that whole working from home experience. And then the other half are so desperate for the in-person experience, they want to get back to work. I think this is going to continue to be quite the dilemma and challenge going forward. Is that something you're seeing amongst your client base?
Yeah, certainly. I think we have to remember as we assess, and review the last 15 months that it really wasn't remote work. It was remote isolation. And a lot of what people are striving to get back for is that interaction. And so we talk about it, it's not an either or scenario. It's not either you're always remote or either you're always in the office. It is going to be this hybrid work scenario, certainly for the foreseeable future, because you're looking at, 85% of employees want an employer to offer them flexible work models. A good number of them are uncomfortable with the idea right now of going back to the office until we ensure that everyone's vaccinated and it's a safe environment. And even when you do go back to the office right now, there's a number of security protocols that are in place that actually prohibits every employee from showing up and being at their desk every day right next to the other employee. And so it's going to be a while. And so we have to begin to build not just the technological infrastructure to support a more secure hybrid work model, but we have to change our culture and our management style to support it so that no matter where an employee is, they not only have access to the work resources they need to get done, their best work done, but also we're not associating a stigma with someone who's not physically in the meeting but still needs to participate in that. So that's what I think you're going to see over the next few months as companies begin to figure out this new hybrid world of work.
Fascinating. Thank you for that. We'll just step away from the Citrix story for a moment. Your personal journey has been fascinating to get you to the role that you have now. I'm always interested to know how people reach the position they're in. What were the major moments for you over the years, the stepping stones, if you will, that brought you to this position at Citrix?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated with business models, particularly digital business models and platform business models. I sort of cut my teeth in the tech industry, early on as an outsider, an observer looking in, both initially as an editor and later as an industry analyst, really advising companies, conducting research, really trying to understand user behaviors and the like as those business models evolved back in the .com era. And then I took the leap to the dark side of software vendor marketing with a small, at that time, yet unconvinced business model around this idea of SaaS, or software as a service. That then accelerated. After about 3 years, we were acquired by a company called Ariba that was beginning that transition to become a SaaS company in its own right, and really took the helm there to help guide that transition, to infuse more digital engagement models, infuse more SaaS business models where you're shifting from selling a product that sits on the shelf to a much more service-oriented model where you're much more aligned with driving outcomes for that customer. We then built up through there, and halfway through that journey at Ariba, we recognized that beyond just transitioning to SaaS, that there was a real opportunity for a platform model. At that point in time, we were connecting the world's largest buyers with their entire supply chain. And so we had this thing called the Ariba Network, which was really a two-sided platform that facilitated purchasing and financial transactions and collaboration between those organizations. And we grew that in the course of 3 years from just about 10% of our overall revenues to more than 50%. So much so that SAP came a-knocking, and they've grown the business network even more since then. My SAP journey was really, at that point in time, they were making the same transition, trying to become a SaaS company in their own right, trying to become a cloud company in their own right. And they had acquired a group of different assets, Ariba, Concur, Fieldglass, as well as their own business by design, their own attempt to get into ERP-based or SaaS-based ERP. And so we oversaw that and really kind of built the go-to-market motion around how do you reach line of business? How do you provide, how do you sell to them differently? How do you have that dialogue? And that eventually wound me up here at Citrix.
There you go. It's remarkable, isn't it? And I've always thought this, everything you do, you don't know always where you're going, but it builds the basis, it builds the foundation of then what happens next. Talking of what's happening next, there's a lot going on at Citrix, I am told. For example, there's a kind of a notion of getting beyond virtualization, which is your core business. So what's the thinking behind this? I think there's always the most courageous move is to move away or move in addition to something that already works and bring in something different.
Yeah. So when we initially laid out the strategy a few years back, it was really about the Gretzky method, right? Skating to where the puck was going. And at the time, companies were beginning a methodical march to the cloud. They were shuttering data centers, moving workloads to public clouds like Azure and AWS and Google, and replacing many of their, if you will, custom legacy apps with commercial off-the-shelf SaaS alternatives, and possibly even re-architecting them when they could as web apps. So recognizing on the horizon that our traditional business of virtualizing these custom apps, allowing them to be distributed out of the data center, even as it moved to the cloud, was going to be temporary, because as companies begin to move on to full SaaS, full cloud, I would argue to say that the last application that ever needs to be virtualized probably has already been built. And so to meet these shifts, we knew we needed to extend beyond just the secure delivery of virtual desktops to provide a simplified way for companies to accelerate these shifts and meet the demands of the modern workforce, predominantly using SaaS web and mobile apps, increasingly doing work outside of a traditional office. And so that's why we expanded to this broader digital workspace vision, where we provide unified access to all of the work resources you need, all of your apps, your SaaS apps, your web apps, your mobile apps, your virtual desktops if you still need those, your content. Secure, wrapping all of that in a contextual security layer that not only authenticates the user into the workspace, but then is constantly monitoring and applying security policies. So your SaaS applications are actually more secure when accessed through the workspace than natively. And then finally, infusing the workspace with intelligence capabilities and workflows to begin to simplify work so that employees could actually more efficiently execute work in collaboration across all of these work resources.
How far did the pandemic end up being the ultimate catalyst for a lot of these changes? Because I assume these were changes that were in mind, and you just pointed out, they were in plan, they were on the horizon. But how much did the last 14 months speed up this plan?
Yeah, it certainly did. These were projections. If you can think far back enough, 15 months ago before the pandemic, that were on the horizon. Companies were trying to hire talent against a background of a shortage of 95 million medium to high skilled workers. There was this huge skills gap, especially for the modern skills like business intelligence, cloud, and security that were needed to digitize your business. And then you had this massive worker disengagement. They were so frustrated with their complicated work environment and all the tools and different channels they needed to navigate that they were just becoming much more disengaged. Well, then the pandemic hit, and these issues didn't evaporate, they only got exacerbated. And now, to your earlier point, employees also are excited about this concept of, I can do better work when I can do purpose-built work. There's some work where you do need to come together and you feel like you need to be in the room at a whiteboard together. And then there's other times when you need to do thoughtful work, and employees want to be in that empowerment environment. And so I do think the pandemic dramatically accelerated a lot of the dynamics we were talking about companies digitizing their business. Right now, as a consumer, you may never go back to a bank branch, for example, right? And that was always on the horizon, but it was a slow, methodical march. Companies really accelerating to cloud so they can have the agility to dial up and dial down resources as needed and meet the next inevitable, unplanned, hopefully opportunity, not crisis, that they need to reach. And then finally, just really recognizing that the work models of yore are quickly evolving to something new that's going to be far more digital, far more distributed, and hopefully far more productive, as we're already seeing.
A lot of this leads us to what you mentioned earlier, which is how important it is to design an employee experience that exceeds expectations. And I know this is something that's very close to your heart when it comes to transforming business results, this experience. So many companies talk about the customer experience. Tell me why the employee experience is so critical for you and for the Citrix team.
Yeah. So the employee experience is critical in a number of ways. Probably the best example is just from an actual anecdote. A customer came to us, one of the largest U.S. banks, and his charter coming in, he actually has the title of Vice President of Employee Experience, was to actually modernize employee experience. He said, we've spent, to your point, the past 5 years investing so heavily in the customer experience, while we're still asking our employees to try to deliver that with antiquated technologies, cumbersome and bureaucratic processes. And we've reached a plateau of our ability to drive that next level of growth, drive that next level of transformation. So there is a fundamental link between customer experience and employee experience. Too often, as this bank recognized, that they focus on the customer experience first, and then now we're beginning to realize that they can't go any further until they enhance the way in which employees can get work done. The second part is that backdrop I was talking about, the very real backdrop we're still experiencing, which is there is a global shortage of 95 million medium to high skilled workers. There's even a more acute shortage of workers who have the modern skills that you need to digitize your business. And as a result, there's a huge talent war. And one of the ways that you can differentiate and attract talent, and they're evaluating you on, is the employee experience, both from the standpoint of, are you providing flexible work models? As we opened up the conversation today, a lot of employees, in fact, it was over 40% of employees said they would actually quit their job if they couldn't maintain flexible work models. The second is what sort of tools and what kind of environment are you giving me to actually execute the job you're asking me to do? And then the third one, which can't be underestimated, is kind of what's your brand purpose? What's the value there? Those three things really stand out. Obviously, in addition to the how much am I going to get paid for my my labor? But those are right up there, atop of the list.
It's very interesting. You're right. There's supply chain issues right now, understandably following the pandemic, but there's human supply chain issues as well. And of course, this is an economy like every other, and there'll be up times and there'll be down times. And I suspect that the calculation will be different when there are no jobs around versus when there are plenty of jobs for the taking. But I think the approach is fascinating. And how can anything negative come out of making sure the employee experience is a great one? Our time is almost up, but I wanted to know where acquisitions fit in to the plan. It sounds like you have a great strategy, you have an amazing team, but obviously there are times where you have to look outside of Citrix to find what you need. I know recently you guys took a project management platform. Is it Rick? Am I pronouncing that right? Or Reich?
Reich.
Tell me a little bit. Tell me about that. Work-Right.
Yeah. So
okay.
as we talked about before, our strategy has been, hey, how do we continue to enable this new secure hybrid work model by reliably delivering the work resources employees need to work across any device, location, or channel. But on top of that, employees are looking for a more efficient way to execute work and to collaborate. Whether that collaboration is around documents, we actually do have a tool called ShareFile, which is around content collaboration, or now with the acquisition of Reich, that acquisition collaboration is around projects. So we can really support not only the delivery of any application type to any device to any location, now we can support any work type from structured workflows and simplifying that experience for the employee, to document-based workflows, or to more complex project management collaboration, which is what Wrike brings us, right? It does really three things. It provides those new and differentiated capabilities within the workspace, getting us to new, largely line of business buyers and users. It speeds our SaaS transformation, right? You're looking at, it's expected to deliver between 180 and 190 million SaaS ARR this year on its own. And then it establishes us in this new high growth market of collaborative work management as companies are trying to figure out, how do I maintain the productivity gains that I've seen in a distributed work environment going forward in the future?
It's very exciting, and you guys are right on top of this incredible curve. And of course, you're also an organization like others that are out there that allows people to work for, say, a company in Singapore from the beach in Barbados. And what can be bad about that? As far as I'm concerned, nothing at all. So we're at time. I'd love to end with really what's next. What's next for you? What's next for Citrix? What do we and our listeners and viewers need to know?
Yeah, I think what's next is what we're experiencing right now. We at Citrix believe we have a major role in helping companies shape this future of work, which, as we mentioned before, seemed to be off in the distance, which is now right in front of us. And so there's a lot that's going to go on in the next few months and the next years to do that. I think beyond that, what gets very, very exciting is, how do we continue to bring more intelligence, more analytics into the workspace, into the work environment, to augment workers, not replace workers, but augment them and help them have the right information at their fingertips, help them make more informed decisions, help them guide them to the next step that provides either better customer service, a bigger transaction, or building the next great product. And so I think there's a lot of converging factors right now that just puts us on the cusp of a very, very exciting future.
It really is. We're excited that you're there as part of that future. Tim Minahan from Citrix, thank you so much for sharing your story, your ideas, and of course your insight as well. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
The Art of the Pivot is brought to you by Signavio.